Thank you, and I think it's good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of country of the land on which we meet today, and recognise their continuing connection to lands, waters, and communities. I pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, cultures, and to elders past, present, and emerging. So I'm delighted to speak to you all today at the Women in Project Leadership Summit. I really enjoyed the panel session and I learned a lot. So I hope you find something in my talk that you can take home with you today. I had decided to ease back on public speaking events this year, but I couldn't say no to this invitation to the venue, to the topic, and obviously it being International Women's Day. So in preparing my talk, I found myself reflecting on which women, in my experience, have modelled strong and effective project leadership. This led me to the conclusion that for most of us, our first experience of effective project management and leadership is likely to have come from our mothers and our grandmothers. My mother, for example, had to manage a household with 5 boys and 1 girl and a husband on very little money. And we joked as adults that she couldn't sit down to a meal without having a conversation about the next one. And I think that was a hangover from all those years of having to think ahead, budgeting, shopping, and so on. But my mother was also a great project manager, leader, not just for our home, but for the entire street. For example, she had a very organised approach to Christmas planning. She would put a little money aside each week over the entire year, and that was literally cash in a box under the floorboards, to ensure that she always had the pool of extra money to cover Christmas presents, turkey, ham, etc., the traditional Irish Christmas. In conversations with a neighbour one year, who was worried about how she would manage Christmas, my mother explained her system. And the neighbour was delighted with this idea and asked if, rather than holding on to her money herself, because she might be tempted to use it for other things, could she give it to my mother for safekeeping until the following December? So several weeks later, my mother was in effect operating a bank, with most of the women on the street giving her money every week to put aside for Christmas. And we were even recruited as collectors. And I remember knocking on the doors with the notebook to keep track. So she never let anyone down, and amazing, because I think she did dip in for loans occasionally, but the money was always there for everyone when they needed it. And looking back on that mini project, I think all the skills were there that you're highlighting in your sessions today. And that as the panel was talking earlier, I was thinking, oh yeah, and I had down trust, leadership, bravery, confidence, clear end goals, documentation, timelines. So it's all there. And as the saying goes, this apple didn't fall from that far from that tree. So I learned a lot from her. Anyway, to the subject at hand, I've called my session, What Have I Done? And this was, of course, the reason it's got an exclamation mark and a question mark is it was meant to be read in 2 ways, which is, what on earth have I done to end up in Canberra working in the Australian Public Service for the first time towards the later part of my working life? And what have I actually done since I came into the job to meet the challenges and demands? So I was appointed to the role of CEO of Safe Work Australia on November the 1st, 2023, so 14 months into the role now. Up to that point, I had lived and worked in South Australia, so taking on the job also meant relocating to Canberra without family, so it was big changes for me personally. And also big changes for the agency, as I was taking on the role following 8 years of the previous CEO and leadership team. So we've recently had a new Safe Work Australia chair appointed, and I caught up with him this week where he told me that the former chair had apparently referred to me as a change agent. I was a bit surprised, as that is not how I would generally describe myself. However, it is true that I have over the last year, in consultation with staff and Safe Work Australia members, led significant changes into how we approach our work. I've always welcomed change, and I would subscribe to the Greek philosopher Heraclitus' view of life that nothing endures but change. Heraclitus noted that just as we cannot step into the same stream twice, so we cannot experience the world in the same way at different times. Reality, according to him, consists not of things or substances that are subject to change, but of processes that change over time. And in the context of Safe Work Australia, our objectives remain the same. The framework within which we work remains the same. The significant change has been in the processes by which we are attempting to meet those objectives and operate effectively within that framework. So for those who don't know, Safe Work Australia operates with a tripartite membership, which recommends law and policy changes to work health and safety ministers across Australia. Our members represent governments, so we've got one from Commonwealth State, the Commonwealth State and Territory governments, 2 representatives from business and industry, and 2 from unions. We have an independent chair, and I'm a non-voting member, so there's 15 of us in all who make decisions. Ultimately, it is this membership that make the decisions about policy and law changes and recommends them to work health and safety ministers across Australia. Except Victoria, they haven't come in yet. Safe Work Australia's object and functions are set out in the Safe Work Australia Act, our corporate and operational plans. We've got a work health and safety strategy, a national return to work strategy. We've got responsibilities as a non-corporate Commonwealth entity under the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Act. And also we have our obligations as Australian public sector employees. All of this I was reminded of constantly when I took on the job. So on the surface, this framework could appear rigid, hierarchical, legalistic, and some might even consider it as constraining. And as I said, in my early months in Canberra, I was given lots of advice about this authorising environment from the team, with the emphasis always on the fact that only members and ultimately work health and safety ministers could make decisions. And I really got a sense that there was a fear I was going to go feral and, God forbid, start having ideas of my own. So I guess the important point to note here is that I didn't want to change what we do, our reasons for doing it, which fundamentally are to save lives. And what better reason could there be? I didn't want to change this authorising environment. I wanted to deliver on it, on the objects of the acts, the plans and the strategies. And I guess the point I kept making to people was, and it comes out of some of the conversation earlier on the panel, it's about the influence you can have as a leader within that environment. So whereas when I went in, I felt the environment was being read as a kind of constraining environment, I wanted to go in and read that environment as a kind of releasing environment and look at all we can do as opposed to what's in this framework that prevents us doing stuff. It's like, there's so much in here we can do and we can influence. So where did I start? So I started with the agency staff. We have 100 staff, so we're small enough really that we can all get together. So I asked each team to participate in what we called a State of the Agency event. And that was in December when I just arrived in Canberra. And so that allowed me and everyone working in the agency to meet in person together and to learn more about each other and the work each team does. So I thought that rather than me go around every team to sit down with them and find out what they did, that we could all do that together in one room. And that was also a way of starting to demonstrate my style, breaking down some of the barriers, I hoped. And it also gave me, I guess, a very good sense of the vibe within each team and across the agency more generally. So each team was asked to prepare a presentation to address 4 questions. What do you do? What are your current priorities? What are your proudest achievements? And what would you like to achieve in the next 5 years? Each team allocated 20 minutes, 15 to present and 5 for questions or discussion. And then the other thing I did, I gave freedom to present in any way they wanted, with as few or as many people presenting. And presentations were not required to be approved by a member of the executive team. Now, I think this was a little bit confronting, but mainly for the members of the executive team, I think. But anyway, it was interesting to see which teams presented with each member having a role, which teams presented with just the director, and so it really gave me a really good sense of where each team was at. And the great thing for me, because literally I just walked into the building, I didn't know really any people in the room. They didn't know me, but everyone really engaged with it in great spirit and with great creativity as well. And we had a lot of fun with it too. So then what we did, and but having said that, underlying it a bit too was that message of, but we can't decide what to do. Only the members can decide what to do. But I said, no, trust me, that we're having this, I explained how this was going to fit in then to the members' strategic planning that was coming up and how it would come out the other end. So what we did then also was use the report of the event to get a facilitator in then to work kind of in smaller groups to unpick particularly what do you hope to achieve in the next 5 years, to work out, do we have the people, do we have the skills, do we have the training, do we have the capacity, that kind of thing. So the big message coming from staff was frustration with how our policy work was progressed. As I said, our processes, because we've got this membership that really makes the decisions, all our work was focused around members' meetings. And there was also a very strong view among staff that members had no visibility of workload. So they just kept piling work on, because everyone has ideas about what should be done in the work, health and safety area. And every meeting there'd be new ideas put on, and the expectation that we would do this work. But work was coming on, nothing was coming off. And then there was this really long process in the middle of projects progressing slowly often, because you're relying on quarterly meetings to move things along. Other key topics coming through, there were some big objectives, big hairy aspirations, whatever the word was used this morning. So there was a really strong view with staff that they'd really like to get our research capacity going again and become a thought leader. Like as someone's put it, like they wanted Safe Work Australia to be, when people think of the weather, they think of the Bureau of Meteorology. When when you think of health and safety, you think of us, and that we're actually driving and leading. So there were some big picture things and then some practical things. So as I said, I fed all that staff information into then the members' planning. And it was interesting that the members themselves separately raised their lack of visibility on the workload and the projects and how they're moving along, and their ability to kind of influence progress. So what we did then, what came out of it all was we created a members' decision-making framework. So we were clear about what decisions actually come to members. And then behind that, we created a project management approach to all our policy work. So I just have a slide on. Oh, yeah, that's the members' decision-making framework. I'm not going to go through all of this in great detail, but we can provide these slides to people, I think, perhaps at the, who've attended. And also Belinda, who's on page 7, is our project management director who we've brought in, and she can talk to you over lunchtime about all what she called our maturity journey through this process. So what you have is really only 4 key decision points for our members. And that's just it, really. So that's because issues are raised like in so many different ways for us to deal with. It can come through, a minister might say, I want you to do this. Members are always raising things they want us to work on. Planning days, HOWS and HOWCA, they're acronyms for the regulators. So we have work health and safety. Regulators say, we're finding issues here, you need to change the law. the workers' compensation schemes come in and say, you know, you need to do national policy work. And then ourselves, you know, there's often things we want to do. So they're the various ways. Senate inquiries, we've had the Senate inquiry into AI, and there's recommendations in that Safe Work should do work on work safety around AI. So what we now have is, so I'll just give the example of lead. So the unions last year said to us, you need to do work on lead exposure. So in the past, we would have just said, okay, lead, you know, let's just do something on lead. And the chemicals team would say, well, yeah, we're already doing blah, blah, you know, engineered stone, a whole lot of other stuff. And then we'd just try and manage it, and it would go on for years. And then the members would say, where's that up to? And we'd say, well, it's coming, but, you know, so it was all very vague. So now we've got a situation where, so a union has raised lead. So the first decision point is for members to say, well, do you want us to work on lead? Is it a priority for all the members? And then they've already said, yes, well, we want to do some preliminary work. So now the agency just does, you know, some desktop research, some targeted consultation. Then we come back with the second decision point, which is, okay, this is what we found. We haven't done the lead one yet, but we might say potentially there's gaps, regulatory gaps. Do you want us to do now into the policy work where there might end up a change in the law or a code of practice or something? And then at that point, they can decide yes or no. Now, at any point, if they decide no, it just comes back to us for a watching brief, or if it's not going to be a legislative change, it comes back to us and we might just do guidance or some, you know, put something on the website. So this decision-making process is really focused on any policy work that's going to come out the other end as a change to the law or a code or something significant. So there's points all along that it could drop out of that journey, I guess. But what it's done for us is really force members to be really critical and focused in their thinking. It's also, when I came in as CEO, most of the papers going to members were for noting. So it was like, note that Safe Work is doing work, you know, and I was saying, well, we're bringing all these people in from around the country for them to note that we're working. So now we had our members meeting yesterday, and it was really great to see that. I think the agenda was 14 items and they were all for decision. So we're really kind of, focusing the attention on using their time. You know, these are all leaders of, you know, regulators and government departments. So if you're bringing them in a room, you want to get value out of them. So then sitting behind that, I guess, is this. It's quite small print, so don't worry about that. It's more the concept I wanted to show you was taking on board that challenge of visibility of work, both internally and with members. We started with a stock take of all our projects. So we literally went through the whole building and said, what are people working on? Put them on a paper, showed them to members and said, okay, this is the range of projects you have us working on. How do you want to prioritize them? So we hadn't even really got to that point of, you know, we had natural priorities like the engineered stone ban, where you might have ministers, like obviously huge policy legislative change where you're driven by ministers' timelines. So they work, but it's the projects behind that you know, we're setting our own timelines that we're getting a bit lost, I felt, and staff felt, and members felt. So we basically did the stock take, got the members to prioritise, and then what that's allowed us to do, obviously, is then focus our resources on the highest priority. And it's also improved transparency and visibility of our work. So we update this work plan every members meeting. So the orange is highest priority, the middle is priority, and then we've got watching briefs as well. So if members raise kind of random things, we can, at that first decision-making point that I showed you on the members framework, we can say, well, look, not now, but don't lose it and put it in the green so we can come back to it if things change or priorities change. Yes, so the members get that every members meeting now. And as I said, behind that, then we've established a project management approach. We've employed Belinda, who's been fantastic and has set us up all our tools and resources behind it. We have a steering committee meets every Monday with all the leadership team and the directors of the various teams. They all discuss how the projects are tracking. So we've got the, project tracker stuff. And what's really great, and again, it came up, is it's also enabling that culture of collaboration across teams, because that was another issue that came up when we did our State of the Agency event, was the silo, I think, which is hard in any organization, and that idea that people might be working on different things. We're consulting with the same people. That's the other thing. Every project we do, we're consulting with the same unions, industry, regulators. So it's also making sure that we're not kind of duplicating effort there, that we can focus, get the most out of one meeting, so to speak. And also that members know, because that was a frustration for them, is, you've people like the Australian Council of Trade Unions, the Australian Chamber, ACI, Australian Industry Group, like they now can tell their members when we're coming as well. So as well as the work plan, we give them a consultation plan every meeting, so they know when they can expect to hear from us. So for people who love kind of certainty and project planning, it's fantastic and amazing, because it's just the clarity in it. Because I know, I had no doubt whatsoever that every person in Safe Work Australia, when I came in, worked really hard. The quality of the work coming out was exceptional. But what this does is, as I say, just give us that ability to manage and to put in resources when, we need to maybe do a surge of work. And also I used to get questions in the early days from members saying, well, when can we expect that? And I'd ask, when can we expect that? And again, with the best of intentions, people would say, it was hard to tell, or maybe a couple of years, And I said, I don't have years. I don't have a couple of years, So it's like, it might sound odd, but, and as I said, it wasn't that people weren't working. It was just there wasn't a kind of rigor around how we were managing that work. So, yes, and it's just the standard, orange, amber, orange, green, and again, as I said, we had, with the engineered stone ban, we've been directed by ministers to review it. And so just over Christmas, our timeline on that is 30th of June this year. So because we were kind of amber in that and kind of moving a bit too close to red, we were able to then make the decision, okay, let's actually just put more resources in there, do it as a task force and clear that, so that's what we've done. And I think last year we might not have been able to do that as visibly, I suppose, and transparently to the staff and to everyone as to why we're putting, resources in there, taking them from somewhere else. The other thing that was really encouraging for me is yesterday in Sydney, we had our strategic planning for this year with members, and they were all talking about the work plan. So I asked, one of the questions was, are you happy with the work plan approach, the decision-making framework? And yeah, they're all happy with that. And what's really good for me is that within that strategic planning, when members were raising new projects and new ideas, it was other members who were saying, but hang on a minute, the work plan, and the prioritising, and if we put that on, we might have to move that. And yeah, it was just so fantastic for me to see them managing it themselves rather than me having to say, well, we can't do that yet, or if you want that tomorrow, something else has to shift a bit further back, perhaps, so we can do the tomorrow thing. So yeah, that's just a little bit kind of high level. As you say, if you want more detail, Belinda is your woman. And then just for the executive team, we get this every executive meeting. So what this is just taking out, we've got about 50 projects on the go all the time on the work plan. So I've just chosen the first block is the projects that are my priorities, I guess, that they're either politically risky or there's some reason why I have a particular want to keep an eye on them. And then we also look at the amber and red every executive meeting as well, just to see, do we need to make decisions about that? We've recently done a survey with staff because, I mean, to be fair, it was new for our staff, this approach, and challenging for some. And just to be able to, you know, some of the feedback coming back from the survey we did, I think I need to do another bit of work on demonstrating the value, you know, of what we're doing and why we're doing it this way. And I think this, and it just reminds me some of the panel discussion as well is you can't just explain it once. You know, I think you have to constantly keep reminding people of why you're doing things the way you are and the end goal. And also staff changes over the years, or over the time. So I think that's the reminder I got this morning was, communication as the leader, and recognition of all the work that's been done, but also, that clarity of why we do things. So coming up to lunchtime. So I just thought at the end, because I did ask, I suppose, what have I done? The other meaning. Look, I will be honest and admit that I felt very much like an outsider when I arrived in Canberra and into the Australian Public Service. I did feel vulnerable to the comments about my lack of experience with Australian public service systems and processes. And that advice in the early days of what I could and shouldn't do, I was, second guessing myself a lot. And so I think, but maybe they're right, maybe I shouldn't do this, maybe I can't do this. But anyway, what got me through those early months were some really supportive senior women who stepped in and gave me great advice. And so these were women who had held roles in the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, Fair Work Ombudsman's Office and ComCare. So they reminded me, and I thought this was great actually at the time, but they reminded me that I didn't appoint myself, that others far more senior and influential than I am appointed me and trusted me to do the job. So that was really useful advice about fighting the imposter syndrome and, just that thing of backing yourself, backing your gut. Because my gut feeling was, no, we can do this better. And like, people want me to do stuff, so, and people want Safe Work Australia to do stuff. So it's really, that focusing on the reasons that you're in the job and you were asked to do the job. Staying brave, that was also another very helpful advice. I do note I also had some really great supportive male colleagues, but I was thinking, was there a difference? And I think again, and it came up, I think, in the panel that my male colleagues tended to come to me as I felt I proved myself, as they got to know me and through my work interactions, whereas many of the women just contacted me out of the blue and said, can we help? So I'm not making any generalizations about that. It's just my observation of how it was for me at the time. But I wouldn't have survived without them, I don't think, in those early months in Canberra last year. Finally, I see that I put in my synopsis the question, has being a woman helped or hindered me in dealing with the challenges of my recent work? And ultimately, in considering that question, I did find myself remembering Julia Gillard, reflecting on her time as Prime Minister and the challenges she faced when she noted that being a woman in that job doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain nothing, but it explains something. So thank you for listening, and I'll leave it there. And I'll be around for lunch, so I'm happy to take questions over lunch, and I encourage you to talk to Belinda if you want to know more detail about what we did and how. Yes. Thank you.